Hello, welcome to another episode of G.I. Joe New News Review. I am joined by my special guest, Hawk Sanders. He is the publisher of Rising Sun Comics and many other projects. At the moment, we are not going to go into those. This is going to be a series of interviews with Hawk covering different aspects of the G.I. Joe brand. We're going to discuss Action Force in this episode. We're going to go into G.I. Joe and publishing in subsequent episodes. So thank you, Hawk, for coming and talking with me.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
So we had quite a long discussion, several long discussions, I might add, at Assembly Required, which just ended a week or so ago, about a bunch of different topics of the G.I. Joe brand, Action Force, publishing comics. We had a lot in common. And so I thought this was a good opportunity for us to do a series of discussions on the brand in all of its iterations. And how do you feel about that?
Oh, most definitely. I think there's so much to unpack. There's so much that people don't realize that are going on inside publishing and comics and the GI Joe world, and so I think there's a ton to talk about here. Go ahead, David.
So you have a Kickstarter that started. I think it was today. I'm not sure if it was today or not, but I saw it today, and I funded or I pledged, and it was very good for me because I was able to fund all of the issues. I was able to do the Action Force 300-page book and the Palatoy previous book that was a Kickstarter a while ago. So I went all in on all the cool Action Force Palatoy stuff for my pledge. And there's a lot of options on that Kickstarter for people.
Yeah, that we're excited to get this out. Action Force Redux has been a project that we've been kind of batting around. I think you've actually talked about it with Robert and Brian, I think, previously. And this is a project that we really wanted to engulf. It's kind of an encompassing of the growth of Rising Sun overall. So we just launched a Kickstarter because we noticed that a lot of people in the US were having a hard time really getting a hold of these. So we wanted to repackage it another way. But also, this book is such an expanse for us that we needed some help getting it done. So if you're looking at that Kickstarter now and you're wondering, hey, I pledged before in the past, I've already supported Rising Sun in this. So those were, if you got the Christmas package that we had done, those were 4B covers. And this is to really pledge for 4A. You can add all the rest as extras if you like. And of course, we want to see the project through to fruition. But this project is very expansive for us. So these are all A-listers on Action Force Redux. Jeff Sr., Robert Atkins, Brian Atkins, all of those, there's so many more. Simon Go is working on it. We've got just a huge slot of A-list talent that's been working on this book, and the book has been it's beautiful if you look at it. Actually, I don't even have a copy yet. That's one of the reasons why I'm late, David. I was supposed to be picking up a package. It was coming across so that I could have printed versions for myself, supposedly this is an A4 format. It's a beautiful setup, large format book, and full color, and it's gotten a lot of praise for scaling up, for putting out the highest quality that we could, and we're very proud of the quality in which it's done.
I've seen previews of this over the last several years, interviewing Brian and Robert Atkins, being at their panels at Joe Fest. And so I've seen some of the artwork, I've seen some of the interior pages. The covers are absolutely beautiful. You couldn't ask for better coloring. It's a crisp, beautiful coloring on this. You weren't lying when you said you got A-class people, because Robert Atkins and Brian Atkins are really the top echelon of GI Joe comic artists, creators, if you want to say, in the industry at this point.
Yeah, and that's what it kind of breaks down to. This goes a little bit into publishing, but the a lot of publishers see it as A, B, and C artists. Where's your scale? How much have you grown? Does the world know about you yet? As to whether or not you land in those categories of A, B, or C. And we really wanted to push all of that. We wanted to show that Rising Sun as a company and Blood for the Baron, which is a joint operation here, had really kind of moved into a new echelon, a new scale of what we could really accomplish. And I think it definitely shows that. It's beautiful. I'm working kind of as an overall editor, as editor in chief on the book. Jim Marshall actually wrote the story from Blood for the Baron. He's also helping edit, or he's primarily editing the book, and I've been kind of running the business side of the operations in order to get it moving and to get it where it's going. Jim is an amazing guy. He is so talented. He really knows. Action Force inside and out. Probably he knows it way better than I do. And he was the right guy to reach out there. If anyone doesn't know, you can go to bloodforthebaron.com and you can see that's his site, of which it's dedicated to Action Force and the Red Shadows and everything that entails in it. And
Palatoy.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
And Palatoy as well.
And Palatoy. And that's kind of where this book diverges a little bit different. So as everyone knows, there's Action Force, Bobby Valaverse Action Force, and it's a great book. And I love what Bobby has done with it. It's a wonderful, wonderful piece. This is a little bit different. This is Palatoy's Action Force. So the two don't really align. They don't really combine. This is going back to originally where Palatoy had done, and this is a spin-off story from taking the Palatoy set and running in a different direction. What if, it answers the question, what if, Cobra Commander was not Baron Ironblood? And that spins off on a whole new tangent of things that begin to set up and unravel. And of course, we've been working on this for quite some time. I think that whole thing started with me asking Jim that very question. Jim and I were in a conversation, and I said, Jim, as you know, Cobra the Enemy, which is a topic we'll get into later, it's coming to an end. I said, I don't know what to do next. And he goes, well, have you thought about going back to Action Force? Because, and we'll talk about the Millerverse a little bit because we've already delved into there. And I said, Jim, that it would be great, but I don't know what story we would go to. And he goes, well, I don't know either. And I said, well, and I posed the question for him, what would you do if you were to be able to write a series on Action Force? And he says, oh, you know what? I would make sure that the Baron never turned into Cobra Commander. And it was like, okay, all right, wonderful, because if you haven't ever read those Action Force books, the Baron is brutal. He's violent. He's not Cobra Commander by any means. He's probably the most violent version of a bad guy that the G.I. Joe mythos has. Wow. Brutally so. I really encourage anyone that hasn't ever read those original Battle Action Force or Action Force to go back and read them, because he's ruthless in what he does to even his own people, not to mention Action Force. And in those original stories, Action Force members die, and they die in a brutal death. They actually kill them off. He kills his own men in order to achieve his goals. He's very violent, always after the echelon. So it brings a whole different storytelling element whenever death is on the table and there's no resurrection coming. So it's it makes him this violent person, which I like. That I'm a fan, so I enjoy reading someone that's willing to go to the nth degree. And go ahead, David.
As a fan myself, I didn't really. I have a very vague recollection as a child of the European Action Force because I read G.I. Joe European Missions. And then when I got back into the community, I realized there was more to it. And then, of course, Patty Lennon and Brian Hickey and David McDonald's book, I was able to read about the comics and the continuity of the comics. I didn't have any. I've been trying to go back and get them. I have a handful here and there, but I don't have the complete run of the Action Force comics and stuff like that. I have the G.I. Joe Action Force comics, all of those magazines and things like that. But there's been a big push for a lot of the companies that are dealing with G.I. Joe as a brand to incorporate. Hasbro has even incorporated the European Outback, and then they're going to be going with the European Big Ben, and now Super 7 is going to be doing the Cobra Commander Action Force figure itself as a PO 5 points of articulation figure. So there's seems to be right now is the right time. Seems like we're at the point where the fan base is ready for it. All the companies are aligned, and this should be the place where something like this comes out. I think it will be excellent if the Kickstarter is funded and everybody is able to get all these issues.
So, and I think that that's very much so. And there's been a lot of people that help push that envelope to get us as the U.S. customer base to be able to open up to it. And, Dave Tree was definitely Jim Marshall and Dave Tree and of course, Chris, and all of those guys at the Full Force have pushed our opening and understanding of this, as well as the club. The club put out some beautiful books and some beautiful figures along the way.
Right.
And and I know that everyone's like, where do I'm going to plug here for just a second, David. Everyone's like, where do I start to be able to read this? How do I go about this? And I have a simple solution for you. I have the Rising Sun website. If you go to risingsun.com and you go to our store, you'll actually find the complete Action Force works, volumes 1 to 10, because there's that much information.
Wow.
And they're like 300 pages a piece, but you can actually read it in its intel, and it's in black and white. It has to do with printing aspects, but you can pick up volumes 1 to 10. We'll ship volumes 1 to 3 immediately. 4 and 5 will be coming soon, but we will get them all out as it. And this is kind of the build up into it, because we wanted to make it easy for people to get a hold of a collected edition. So it's called Action Force: The Complete Works. You start at volume 1 and you read through.
Wow.
And
good.
What a lot of and you might be wondering, well, how did they get out so much information? And I think that we have to, Patty may have discussed this at many points, but in the UK, they were called weeklies, and they would actually come out 6 pages every week in Battle or Battle Action Force. And, and whenever they started coming out, you would get them every week. So that's, it's more than a book a month that you're getting, and it's building up very rapidly throughout this. And they would just be either shipped to them in the mail, or you could pick them up at the newsstand. And sometimes it would include special offers. What happened is it starts releasing in Battle, which is the original title. And Battle ran from 1973, I think, up to the point that it becomes, Battle Action Force and then Action Force. But once Action Force starts showing up in the pages of Battle, it is so well received that the numbers escalate, and it's so it's so fantastic in the way that they're approaching it. So eventually it turns from Battle to Battle Action Force, and then it turns into just Action Force at some point, because the numbers are so well received. And then eventually Hasbro buys Palitoy, which was part of General Mills, and they become the Action Force International Heroes. Then it becomes G.I. Joe of the Action Force, and then it turns into just G.I. Joe. over there. So they went through this. It went through this incarnation of changing what it originally entailed into something that was easier for Hasbro to to use. And you can understand that. Bob Brecken, who was the original designer on it, and he was actually one of the original designers on the 12-inch line of Action Man as well. A lot of things we owe to Bob Brecken. And guys, forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe he actually did design the Kung Fu grip and he designed the flocked hair that we actually have on the original GI Joe.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
And you know, so Bob Brecken has been around for quite some time in our universe, and he designed the Red Shadows and Action Force, the 3 3/4 scale that's coming out through Palatoy, and you know, so he's got a lot of influence in where things are going. Um, and without Bob, we probably wouldn't, you know, have half the things that we look at today. He's designed so much more than that. We just don't realize. Um, so to give you a little inclination of where it's coming at and how it evolved into what it is today. So I myself don't look at it as necessarily a cousin. I see it as more as a brother. You know, they're so much more closely related than what we realize. Yes, they're different. GI Joe in the US and Action Force or GI Joe in the UK, they are two different things, but they're a lot more tied together than what we realize. That's everything from Super Joe to the original GI Joe sets to everything along the way. Palatoy had a lot of design quirks that would be moved back and forth between the GI Joe brand and Action Force overall. So if you haven't read them, you know, that's a great place to pick them up rather than having to chase down the weeklies. You can go to risingsun.com and you can pick up Action Force, the complete works right there. And you can start reading from page 1 all the way to volume 10.
I think that's great because you just solved my problem. Because I had heard many years ago there was a licensing issue that IDW was trying to publish those, but it fell through due to some sort of contractual issues or whatever. And don't quote me on this, fans out there, but I heard IDW was trying to do that. But so I'm very happy that you were able to get that done. And now I can go and get them without too much hassle. And I've been like getting friends over in Europe and stuff to hunt stuff down for me, trying to find things. And it's not that easy. It's
Right,
not
right.
like
Yeah.
the US where you can go into any town and there's a comic store with back issues, or well, there's eBay and stuff like that. I suppose I could do that, but it'd be a fortune probably.
Well, and you know, I would like to point this out that everyone needs to understand this as well. These are a labor of love for us. I love the brand. I love GI Joe. I love Action Force. I love Siglo Triple X. If you don't know what that is, you'll have to look it up. But but there's many different facets of GI Joe all around the world, and you know, so and I love it all. I'm a brand junkie, I guess you could say, but I'm in it. So
It's just one of those things. Once you get from 82 to 94 for a real American Hero fans, I'm not talking the stuff before, but you know, you have to start broadening out. And it's good that there's stuff like this out there for folks to go to. You know, you can get Fun School, you can get stuff from Japan, you can get Action Force, you can get stuff from Brazil. There's all kinds of neat stuff. So yeah, I'm very happy.
that, and I think that the club really embraced it as well. And it you know, I'm going to go back to that point about the club really embracing it. And I think it really kind of changed the minds of what it was. So the club had put out a vacation with the Red Shadows. Is that right? Is it 2010? You know,
So
the edition 2010, which really began to open the door for everyone to accept it on a larger base, and especially here in the U.S. And so there's all kinds of groups overseas that are GI Joe collectors. There's actually a French international collecting group over there. If you didn't know that, so they've got like I think they're like 200 or maybe 300 members strong over there, something like that.
I knew about the Italian group, the GI Joe Espanol guys, but I didn't know about the French group.
Yeah, Yeah, there's a French UK group, and there's all kinds of groups out there that are small collecting groups as part of us as a whole. And I say that because I really see us all as one. We're all one. It's not there's not really factions within us. I have never felt that way. I felt like we've always been, a solid community collecting group that has been very open to different ideas and different people and accepting everything as it comes through.
And that's interesting because GI Joe is an international organization of heroes trying to save the whole planet. So that makes sense that GI Joe toy groups are international organizations as well that are interacting with each other, helping each other, supporting each other, and things like that too.
That I want to tell everyone that these projects that we do is labor of love. If there's any profit that's made out of this, we actually donate this back to charity. And we have several charities that we actually do donate to. That makes it really challenging to be able to encompass funds to be able to do more things like this. But because of where it's at and all of that, we have to be really. I want to be everyone aware that it requires the fan base to support in order to move these projects forward. So a lot of the Action Force stuff, if there's any profit made over it'll either go back into the next Action Force project, or most of it, if we have any profit, will go into charities. And I think there's several that we're doing. Action Force Redux has the Humane Society, I believe, we're doing in the UK, where they help sick and lost animals and try and help get them back. So we're planning on donating to them through this Kickstarter once our fees are all covered for printing and distribution. So
Well, that's great.
obviously we've got a big plan for moving forward Action Force Redux. We'd like to see it get to 100 issues. We'll see if everyone enjoys it and wants to support, then hopefully we'll get there.
So it comes down to really getting the word out. And I'm obviously very thoroughly ingrained in the community, and I go to a lot of events. And so I'm seeing a lot more of this stuff out there than the average fan. What do we need to do to try and get this out there? Do we need to share the Kickstarter? Do we need to do more interviews like this with you and the folks working on Action Force so we can get the word out there? Because I want this to be successful. And I know there are fans, and I know there's are people out there that want more of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sharing it on your personal media, you may not realize it, but you probably got 10 Joe fans or Action Force fans on your personal thing. I know that some of the people watching thinking, well, sharing it on mine isn't going to do much good. You'd be surprised. It may only take one or two people to put us over the mark to be able to fund the next issue and get it out there. And we do need the help. Rising Sun has funded the first 3 issues already. We just need help getting the 4th one done. And so hopefully we can see this up to fruition and get the 4th one complete. But yes, share it on your social media. Interviews would help. That way it gets out to more people support it and back it. You can also go into risingsun.com. You can buy many of the different books that we've got over there, which would also help support this. So if you don't have the Action Force Complete Works, please pre-order all 10. All of this goes toward that project that'll help fund it into its next incarnation. There's also the Millerverse, which we can get more into a little bit. So you're going to find Action Force Red Dawn. You're going to find Action Force World War III over there. And we'll talk about those here a little more in depth. These projects that you're seeing as add-ons inside the Kickstarter, we're going to talk about those a little more too. Picking those up, it also helps, see this project to fruition. Like I said, this is it's a large project. It's a very large project because we're really trying to push what we can do and show the world that we can be a contender, and we can put out a book that is super pretty. But go ahead, David.
But that's the interesting thing. You're an independent publisher, but you're not an independent publisher when it comes to licensing and things like that. You don't have a lot of the how should I say, backing of Hasbro per se. They are familiar with it and they are watching what you're doing. And you do have to get approval, I believe. But it's not like IDW was doing that G.I. Joe. So you need more support. You need the fans to really get behind this project and help you with this.
Well, this is seen as truly a fan endeavor. So some people would say that they don't accept fan related content, but it's kind of hard to say that when you've got people like Bob Brecken, who has been a part of this project, and Simon Go and Kevin Hopgood, and when you've got these big names that are attached to it, you begin to ask the question: is it still part of where's your defining line? That goes into the question of comics and publishing, because I have a whole different opinion on that. I don't see fan fiction in comics as same as fan fiction for writing, for fan fiction that you might read online. The two are completely two different animals. It's the difference between a house cat and a tiger. Yeah, they're both feline, but one takes a lot more than the other. Not discrediting writing whatsoever, but just comics in general is a whole different take of what you have to build up in order to have a finished product. There's so many more people involved that takes so much more time. There's so many edits and reviews and the process to package it together. Plus, the printing is completely different. The cost of printing is different. Printing a black and white page versus printing a full color art piece, two totally different costs. So, they're two different animals. But we kind of see this as, I don't think there's anyone really out there doing it the way that we're doing it at the moment, or not at the scale. I think we're probably the only ones. And we've been doing it for quite a while now. I think we started in 99 or 90, it might have been 98. At the break of the internet was brand new, and we're doing fan pieces in order to get a few appraisals from our fellow fans, and it led all the way into this. So here we are, 20 plus years later, and so it's been a good ride, and I've learned a lot, and there's a lot of people that have helped me get this far, and without the fans supporting us, we probably wouldn't have gotten this far.
It's been 25 years. That's
yes.
A long time to be doing independent G.I. Joe comics. You definitely have some experience. You know what you're doing, or it would have ended in a year or 2 years or whatever it is.
Correct.
So that speaks volumes.
Yeah, that's another factor of it, right? That comes to its scale as to whether or not is this considered fan fiction or not. If doing it for 25 years, I think that's a whole different, evolution by itself would hopefully say that it's something completely different, at this point.
Yeah.
And there's a learning curve, and you always learn something new. Even though we've been doing it 25 years, we're still learning new things and hopefully improving our craft and putting out the best work that we possibly can. I hope that comes through, especially with this project, Redux, where it's to a whole new level.
From what I've seen, it definitely does, and the fact that you are obviously saying you want to learn, you want to get better. If you don't do those things, you're gonna end up extinct. And there have been other independent comic publishers and stuff that have gone extinct, and they were very high quality, very good publishing, but they didn't use their skills and learn and improve as they went along. They just spent too much money or whatever it was in the cost of this stuff. And like you said, it is cost. There is writing, there's inking, there's penciling, there's covers, there's printing, there's all this stuff that goes into this. It's not just like and I'm not taking anything away from authors or whatever, just typing away on the computer and having a book published. There's a big difference, obviously. There's so many more steps and moving parts to comic book publishing, like you said.
But, I think a lot of people are surprised at really how much more there is. They think that, oh, well, I'm going to finish this and my part and it'll be out in a month. When that book has probably been planned for 6 months or a year, even depending on the production schedule of everyone involved before you actually get a printed copy. And that's after the writer's done his thing. That's after the writer's complete. So if the writer really wants an amazing script and needs to take time, it takes a year, to put together something that's wonderful. It has happened, and then it takes a long time to actually get one out. So you think about this project. This project was actually started in 2017.
Wow.
Action Force Redux was started in 2017, which we did pitch it to Hasbro, Rebellion, and IDW ourselves in order as a joint operation between them. So Redux is definitely went through all of those categories as trying to get a larger publisher involved so that we could go to the next level. Yeah.
Well, and yeah, and I've seen the work that Robert showed. He showed it. He said he had been working on it for a couple of years. The first time I saw him, that was 2 Joe Fests ago, that he was showing it. It was having a panel, and he was supposed to have the writer, but there was a connection. He couldn't get the writer to come through on it. But the quality definitely is high standard from what I've seen, and it's as good as you can get in comic book publishing. And I'm a fairly good expert in the comic book world myself. I've been collecting comics since I was 6 years old or whatever, and I buy a lot of comics to this day. So I'm very familiar with what high quality is and what is it high quality, and the efforts that people have to put forth to create these pieces of art. Basically, every issue is a piece of art because all the effort that goes into it, not just for the cover and the interior art, stuff like that. There's lettering and all this other stuff that goes into it. People don't realize it. It just seems like it comes out, there's only 3 or 4 people at the bottom of the credits, but there's a lot more involved than that.
But I was gonna kind of spin here just a little bit. Whenever after I told Jim and we got started on this project, because I bounced back and forth quite a bit, there's actually 4 different books that came out of this one single project. So Jim had started, he wanted to do, and he had been working on it for a long time, the GI or the Palatoys Collector Guide. And he had been kind of working on it, wanted to do it. It didn't take much for me to push him to say, Jim, do this. The world is ready for a collector guide, a complete collector guide. This is before Patty and Lennon had done theirs. So he really got on it, and I'll tell you what, he's amazing once he gets moving, and like his mind is just perfect for this. There's no rock that's not underturned. He's flipping everything to make sure it's the highest grade quality. And the Palatoy Collector's Guide, once we put that out, we did the first 2 printings, I think. He did or maybe it was the first. I think it was the first 2 printings. And then we switched to printing it in the UK after that. That book had actually was kind of a precursor that led into Action Force Redux. So if before we had ran out of, I think we'd sold somewhere. It was I don't remember how many copies we've sold, but we've sold out 2 or 3 times and had to order.
I've tried to get it twice, and the print run is too small, and I have not been able to get it myself.
Yeah, every time I take it to a show, it's gone like that. I mean, it just sells out. And the last time, I think I was selling them for $100 a copy.
Wow.
And they were selling. So it's a really good resource. If you don't know Action Force and you want kind of an insight into it, this is the book you want, because it really kind of breaks everything down from action figures to vehicles to blueprints to printed material to comic books and everything that came out in between. So it's really a collector's resource for it. And I haven't actually got my hands on Patty and Lyndon's book yet. I want to take a look at it. So guys, if you're listening, I do apologize. I have not even had a chance to look at it yet. So I've got to get one aftermarket copy and take a look at your book. Um,
That one I did get, and I did back both volumes of that. And the first volume is absolutely beautiful, the work that they've done. I can only imagine what the other books look like, and the quality that you have behind those. I'm sure they were beautiful, but I have not been able to get. Actually, I looked at one at Assembly Required. Ben Conway had one in an auction, and I looked at. I was like, oh man, I really wanted this, and I couldn't get it.
that there was two other books that I ended up, or three other books that ended up coming out of this. Bob Brecken, if you don't know this, had contacted Jim Marshall, and they actually wanted to do a palette toy because it's the is this the 35th or 40th year for them? I think
Something
it's the
like that,
35th
yeah.
or 40 year anniversary, and Bob, they're putting on a display or an exhibit at the Palatoy at the Palatoy, I forget what city it's in, but the Palatoy factory. So they're actually have this display that's going to be running for a month long or so. So Jim was putting that on. I think it's still running right now. So you may be able to go catch it and check it out. So it kind of covers some of the pre-production art. It covers what they were thinking about how it came to be, and about I think it even covers kind of the sell-off of Palatoy into Hasbro Greater. But it covers everything, and I think they have a display of action figures on over there, as well as some goodies and giveaway. So, guys, if you're in the UK and you're listening to this, check it out. There's an exhibit that's being run over there that's been put on by Jim Marshall and Bob Brecken that you want to go be a part of and take a look at
I would love to
that.
see.
So that's another project that kind of fell out of this. It's kind of somewhat related. Then there's also the DVD that you're talking about that's part of this Kickstarter. So there's a DVD in there. That DVD covers all of this material that it took to actually put on all of these books, plus that exhibit. So if you want to, it has interviews with Bob Brecken, and it has all kinds of extra content that you can see, that you see him talking about. So if you're interested in that, you've got to back this Redux Kickstarter, and you can actually pick that up there. There's also a 40th anniversary commemorative that we've updated. We originally put out a 30th anniversary commemorative, and Jim Marshall updated it. Now it's a 40th because there's about 10 pages more content. Because when we put it out, 10 years ago, a lot has happened since then. All of the club stuff that we just talked about. There is the Red Shadows really started showing up in Larry Hama's run. So there's a lot of content that's been added in those 10 years to bring us up to scale now. So we have repackaged that a little bit. So it's got some new pages of content with the new cover that was done by Alejandro Cabal, who's well known as well as part of the Action Force community, and the Australia community, because he's I believe he's I think he's in Spain, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, then from there is another book that you really want to get your hands on, and that is the Declassified, Action Force Declassified. Action Force Declassified.
That just ended the Kickstarter, a couple of weeks ago, right?
It did, but because of Redux, you can actually purchase it through Redux if you get in back issue 4, and then you can actually add it on as an extra. You can add all of these things on, including the guidebook, the DVD, any one of the covers that we've already printed of Action Force Redux, the trade paperback, and Declassified. And Declassified.
I think I did all of those. I'm not sure if I got the DVD or not, but I did like all the issues, all 4 issues, and I did 2 books. And I don't know if the DVD's in one of those books or not, because I think one of the previous Kickstarter, the one that just ended, had a bunch of DVDs as part of it. So I don't know
Yes.
if the DVD is separate or a part of it or how that works.
Yeah, that DVD is the same.
Oh,
So we're using that to help fund the Action Force Redux project. So you could have got it there, but you can also still get it here. If you missed out there, you can jump on here
okay.
in order to help us get Action Force Redux into it. Thankfully, Jim and I work together pretty exclusively and extensively, and he's allowed for that to happen. Now, if you don't know about Declassified, I want to talk about it for just a minute or two. This is the book that everyone knows Dan Klingon-Smith's, A Real American Hero books, and which it covers pre-production art for how GI Joe was put together, and you get to see some of the previous incarnations. That's what this is. Declassified covers Action Force pre-production art and some of the things that were supposed to come out, during the Palatoy set before it was bought by Hasbro. And there's a lot of content there. There's a lot of stuff. And that book was a direct incarnation building of Action Force Redux. As we're building Action Force Redux and talking to Bob and putting everything together, and really this is Jim. Jim is the person really doing the heavy lifting here. This whole other book created itself out of that, called Declassified, Action Force Declassified.
Wow.
And I'm thrilled that it happened. I'm thrilled that this come together so naturally, that there is all of this pre-production artwork to show people what could have been if Action Force had continued on without Hasbro's purchase. Now, would it have been our cousin anymore or brother? Probably not. But regardless, it's in there, and it's pretty amazing stuff. Some pretty wild concepts.
I've seen some of the not pre-production art, but the toys that were going to be made if Hasbro hadn't taken it over, and I think 95 and 96 lineups or whatever, and they look really cool, actually. I like seeing how G.I. Joe gets reimagined by these different countries and different communities of Joe fans and stuff. It's really funny, and some of the stuff like the Fun School, how they made like Superman, Super Joe, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Those things I find unique, and the different stylizations and character names, Gaucho and Jammer and all these people. It's fascinating. And it makes my love of GI Joe grow even more. As much as I know the Real American Hero GI Joe, now my knowledge is growing, and I can get more experience in all these international forms of GI Joe.
There's quite a bit out there still to be found if you're just starting, and you're going down. This is a great way to jump on with this Kickstarter and learn more. But there's so many other things out there that people don't realize. There was 4 and 12-inch GI Joe comic books that were actually put out through Argentina. I think there's like 5 of them. And it's really interesting to see their take on it, where GI Joe is more of this action spy, and he's always saving the girl. So there's a lot of stuff out there, and it's really cool to see our favorite brand in these different incarnations, kind of what you're talking about. And to know that you would have never thought that there would be GI Joe in France, but yet here we are, GI Joe in France. Josh Egbin has just he's really big into the international sets. And did he show you these? I think you saw them. They were at AR. They are a French teen book, I think it is, or a book. What are they called again? I can't remember. It's got one name to it.
I can't recall exactly. I don't think he showed it to me, because I don't remember that. I think I would have if he had shown it to me, but I don't recall what it is.
It's a French magazine that was put out, and it was meant for it's this girl, may have been Dora, I think it is, or so. But it was this girl, and she was really known for promoting kids' products. So she's kind of like an influencer of France.
Oh,
so and she was well known. She was kind of a pop star over there, and she had this magazine, and it ran for like, I think Josh told me like 80 something issues. You'd have to get Josh on and really talk about this. He knows way more about it. It's so interesting because what it does is I think here's this magazine that is not related to GI Joe, but has GI Joe content actually in this magazine in France. So to hear that there's actually a GI Joe collecting community and it kind of falls out of this magazine now is kind of odd. It's really kind of an odd thing. And what they would do is they would take the cartoon episodes and they would take screenshots of them and build comics out of those screenshots. And then you could actually buy the magazine and you could actually fold them up and make your own comic from the cartoon episodes made by Sunbow.
Wow.
Yeah, Josh has showed a couple of these. They're pretty interesting. But
I think he did mention this to me vaguely, maybe at a convention, but obviously I have so much stuff in my head that I didn't pick up on it as well as you have. But it does sound fascinating. I'll have to learn more about it. That's for sure.
yeah, it's really an interesting thing, to see. But I think it's really interesting that because they had GI Joe in France, and this was kind of their way of promoting it was through this pop star who, you know, who,
I've seen some stuff from other countries. Like I've seen Patrick Stewart did a review of the Japanese comic books and
oh
toys that
yes,
people made, and I was like,
yeah, yeah.
I did not know that either. So that's the thing about the community. We are so blessed with the members of our community that you can practically go anywhere in the world, and there's fans out there that can educate you on that area of the world for GI Joe. And there's just so much out there. If you want to just get comic books, there's a way to get comic books from around the world. If you just want to get toys, there's a way to get toys from around the world. Animation's not the same because they just took the American animation, just changed it slightly or whatever. Like the British GI Joe, they called Sergeant Slaughter, Sergeant Slammer, and a few things like that. But the animation's not as prevalent. But a lot of the other aspects of the GI Joe brand are, and these obviously you guys have gone deep dive into Action Force, and you've got a whole collection for the fans to get into if they want to find out more about this, learn more about Action Force, the history and stuff like that. There's a whole line of products you just laid out for fans. Just on this Kickstarter, they could pick all these different things off for it, which I did myself, a bunch of it.
And obviously you guys can you can, if you're following us on Rising Sun social media, you can find that link there. You can hopefully once it's posted, I'll try and copy the link and throw it up as well. Or you can go to Blood for the Baron and you can find the link there as well. Now he is showing previews of the pages that are going in the book. So if you're going to Blood for the Baron Facebook, you can actually see some preview pages of what's coming in those stories. So if you're curious about what this looks like, go check it out. Like it looks really well. It looks great. So you can find it those two places of getting a hold of that link, or you can search it for Action Force in the Kickstarter search bar as well. I was gonna probably shift over and talk about what we've previously done in Action Force.
Yeah,
sure. And talk about Rising Sun overall. So obviously these are fan content for us. We love this stuff, and that's why we're doing it. That's why we've been doing it for so long. If you want to support Rising Sun as a group overall, you can go on our website and buy some of our non-fan related content, which helps us grease the wheels of keeping the doors open and everything else. So you're going to find all kinds of interesting stuff over there. If you like post-apocalyptic, we have a book called Collapse that kind of covers the fall of society through nuclear fallout, and what happens when there's only human survivors and the rest of the world has mutated.
wow.
So, and we did a lot of research into real life mutations and stuff like that when we were putting the book together. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We talked a little bit about this. I found this fascinating that you actually used real life mutations and real life conditions to put into this. So it's very, I won't say autobiographical, but it's factual.
It could be plausible. So I say could be because the artists get a little carried away sometimes. But the turtle disease and all of these things are kind of real. There's some stuff out there. So they did take some liberties at times with it, but it is based in real information that we searched, and did deep dives to learn it. So there's that. The Collapse. There's 12 issues of Collapse. There is a trade out there if you that you can find on our website if you just want to read, the first six. It's probably one of our better sellers, but you can go check that out. We've got a comedy piece coming up called Red and Green. It's about two little dots, and they're always bantering back and forth. Sometimes it's political, sometimes not. But you can find that. That'll be a kind of a bathroom reader, big thick 300-page bathroom reader. You can take it there. We have Armadillo Justice, which was help. It's a project that kind of came up through my imagination. It deals with three armadillo brothers who are very cowboy hick related, and they're dealing with ants that are trying to colonize the world. I think there's about 18 issues of that out there.
Wow, that sounds interesting. It's more of an anthropomorphic type comic.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. The pretty much. I would say that, but it's definitely a comedy piece. Kids love it. We have a kids book that has all like activities in the back, and you can actually kind of like work through some of the activities in that title. So that's really well received, and I love taking that to kids shows and seeing kids actually. I have several pictures where there's just a line of kids, and they've all got different copies of Armadillo Justice reading it, like outside of the store. So it's really quite good.
It sounds like that would be a cool cartoon.
Absolutely.
The theme of it sounds like it would be perfect for a children's animated cartoon.
Well, my mentors on this were, I had some really good mentors. If you don't know, guys, I have a degree in toy design. That's kind of my primary gig. This is a secondary thing that I do.
Wow.
So when I was putting this together, my mentors at the time was Rebecca Taylor and Mark Taylor. Mark Taylor sadly has passed away, and he was a great guy. Mark Taylor, if you don't know, was the creator of He-Man. He also worked on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I got to work a little bit with Eastman on this. So if it has that flair to it, that's why. Those guys were kind of influencing this step in that direction. And I'm glad they did. It turned out to be a great piece of embracing the quirkiness of fun comedy, and it just gets kind of like slapstick and,
Sounds a little bit kind of like Ren and Stimpy or Pinky and the Brain type of stuff.
A little bit, yeah. The ant's always trying to take over, and they've got to basically find a new way to put them down. But there's, you've got three different personalities of these armadillos. One is, and the reason why I thought I'll explain that here in just a second. But they all have different personalities. You have kind of the leader type who's a little more cowboy, and then you've got the mechanic who's a little more hillbilly, and then you've got kind of the goofy one that's a little more rockabilly. So so we kind of went off in those directions to do it. So it is very kind of a Pinky in the Brain where there's a new plot. They've got to stop it, so it's meant to be fun in that take. And there's several other titles there too that you can choose from at any one point. There's the Seer. We have several titles that which we put out. We also do some publishing for other people's work, and that helps keep Rising Sun open. It helps keep us moving. That's where those are for profit books that we actually make profit on. So if you're going to support, don't just support the fan comics. Buy some of our other stuff as well, and Tell us if you like it. Tell us if you don't like it. And I would love to hear that. I want to talk about the Millerverse. So what we did previously. The Millerverse started with Jamar Miller. He was the original owner of Rising Sun. It was in the early days, it was Jamar, Jim, myself, and we had one other. And the three of us are kind of still involved in different ways. But Jamar was kind of running the company, previously, and got us up to about 2008, I think. And in 2000, I think it might have been 2005, actually, 2005. By the time we get to about 2005, Devil's Due was really heavy into World War III. And I remember Jim, myself, and Jamar sitting down, and there's emails back, and we're emailing back and forth. And Jamar decided that he was actually going to bring back the Raid Shadows. So I helped him cook up a couple of ideas on how to bring them back because I had some knowledge. And then we got Jim involved. So when we talk about the Millerverse, what is the Millerverse? The Millerverse is Hasbro combined universe long before Hasbro ever thought of doing it. And it really is the Hasbro combined universe. It covers all the Hasbro properties and ties them into World War III, is what it does from Devil's Due, which is now considered a disavowed, universe
timeline.
Yeah, the Virgin timeline. So we started out, and first we had to get the Baron and all of his guys back in the thing. So Red Dawn, Action Force Red Dawn, which you can find on our website and buy them. They're all in stock. We just ship them straight out. There's two variant covers, A and B. Actually, there might be a third variant cover that would be really hard for anyone that doesn't have it to find. It was exclusive only to Blood for the Baron back in the day. But what you do is it starts off from issues 1 to 11 of Red Dawn, and it kind of encompasses the Red Shadow's return long before we ever got to this point. So Red Dawn builds it up. There's actually 2 trade paperbacks that kind of cover the entire story, and that's what it really does. It combines the universe together: Action Force, GI Joe, and the Red Shadows, which builds into World War III. So there's actually 2 numbers on it, and a lot of people get confused with the Millerverse, and we named it that after Jamar. And what it does is there's actually a number in the beginning, and that's your read order number. So if you start with issue 1, and then it says Action Force Red Dawn issue 1, the number 1 in the beginning is the read order. As it can get kind of messy to follow through with how you need to read the books. So you read Action Force Red Dawn 1 through 10, and then it goes into Argent 7, which is a GI Joe related property of Argent 7, and deals with many different South American contingents that fall into GI Joe, and then it goes into Cops, it goes into Mask, it goes into Jim, it goes into all of this stuff, and actually creates the Hasbro combined universe as a total. So you go through World War III on a much grander scale than what Devil's Due had actually planned. So if you haven't read these, it can be a little confusing, but if you just remember that read order in the beginning, there's a number on top. That's the way you want to read through your books. So Jamar had actually got up to 50 issues of this. It was like 45 issues or 50 issues.
That's a lot.
Before, in 2011, he stepped away and actually handed it to Jim. And then I asked to take it over from Jim a year later after that. So it's like 2000, I think it was 2011 when I took it over. No, 2013. So he did 50 issues of GI Joe related content, and there are GI Joe characters that show up in even the Cops issues, and there's Red Shadows that show up in the Cops issues, and there's all kinds of content because it's intended to be an entangled universe together.
Well, the thing about the Cops, that's kind of in the future, a little bit farther down the line, isn't it? So it would be, I think, Wetsuit or somebody had a son that was on the Cops.
Yeah, but in according to the Devil's Due timeline, it took place in real time. So when Real American Hero ended in '94 and Devil's Due comes back in 2001, by 2006, you're real close to that timeline.
Uh, that's true.
I think of when it was supposed to take place. So Jamar had written a lot of these and kind of put them together. Um, when he stepped away, he had a number of plots that had been prepared for how to finish the series. So he didn't actually quite finish the series. And he asked me if I would finish it. So we have finished it. There's actually 55 total books, and it does go into Commandos and Marco, and it goes into let's see. There's of Scars and Shadows, which is very much Red Shadows related and deals with Scar, because it tied in GI Joe Extreme in this as well.
Wow.
And it was a much grander thing of it. And those books are pretty too. Those books were created much later. I have to tell you that earlier books, we're still figuring things out, as we should be. So give us that room to breathe. Don't roast us at a spit for something we did 20 years ago. Take a look at the stuff we're doing now and go ahead.
GI Joe Extreme was connected to GI Joe as well. I believe the child of Flint and Lady J's on the team, and then Scar refers to Cobra Commander, that he kind of took the reins of Cobra and changed it and became the next guy. So GI Joe Extreme is in the GI Joe continuity very loosely, as well as Cops', Mask, ROM, Micronauts. All these properties are in there. They're all very loosely, even in Humanoids, technically, because Ace has a relative, and Ace appears in Inhumanoids. So there's so many things, but I like the fact that there's a universe, and we don't just have Humanoids, and we just have ROM, and we don't just have this and that. We have a whole universe. If we want to cross Visionaries into GI Joe, there's a way to do it. If we have a qualified writer that can have an imagination that can do that.
What's really interesting is, he did it long before Hasbro and anyone else was looking at it, so there was kind of already crossovers like you're talking about, where Buzz Dixon was kind of crossing things over. This takes that and kind of explodes it into, there's a much more crossover, they're much more involved.
Definitely. I'm surprised. I'm very amazed that I didn't know about this before now. I think the fans would just eat this up. I wish we could get this out more to the fan base, and you'd probably be doing a lot of sales on this type of stuff, because there's a lot of people like me that are anal retentive people and want all their ducks in a row, want it all connected and stuff like that. It's a lot more difficult than you would realize, obviously, but it's still cool.
Yeah, it's very cool, and I, as a comic book collector, to see them cross over. And if you don't know the war, guys out there, if you don't know the World War III story, and most of you, I'm assuming, do, but Devil's Due had they started America's Elite, and America's Elite was a shifting from where they were headed before into what they were into a great war, because they wanted to up their scale as well. So they started getting into more painted books, and they started pushing storylines and diverging from what the fan base had really think. And I really got to give Devil's Due a lot of credit. They did a lot of stuff that was really, really different.
They did.
Sadly, I think even more so than IDW, they really pushed the envelope out there. But go ahead.
Yeah, they were very edgy. They killed off characters. They made characters into villains. They did surprises. Whereas, pretty much in Larry Hama's, you could pretty much predict what was going to happen 7 issues down, how he was going to go. Even though he said he couldn't predict it the issue before, he couldn't do that himself. He had to figure it out. You could do that, but Devil's Due had some really big surprises. A lot of the declassified miniseries were fantastic. Origins, special missions were really good stories. They brought in some new villains that were kind of outside the GI Joe norm. They had existed, don't get me wrong, they existed in the continuity. Devil's Due uh, didn't get the respect that it deserves at the time, but they definitely are getting the respect they deserve then now because of Josh's book. And a lot of the fans have come to go back and realize, wait a minute, I think these guys need to be put out there as quality people that help this brand grow. There was lots of new characters, Kamakura, Scalpel, you name it, Destro's son, Quarrel, not Quarrel, different Dreadnoks. There's so much.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and the Millerverse. So if you guys are reading that and you go back and you're starting World War III, this Millerverse weaves in and out of all of that.
Oh.
It weaves in and out of the Devil's Due run, and you have to read those books along with reading these in order to get the bigger picture. And that's how it was intended. So this is like really crazy stuff. It took me a long time to understand what Jamar was trying to do in order to finish the last set of books. And we've got some pretty good. The last few books have been pretty phenomenal, like really good artwork and really good storytelling. But I think of Scars and Shadows 4 or Mask, I think it's Mask 11 is the last one in the series, but it does wrap everything up in a nice complete bow, and that's what we really wanted to do because we felt like that, now it's time to finish the story. And so if you're reading that, you can go to risingsun.com. You can pick up anything in the Millerverse. We actually have a tab down there. If you click Millerverse, it's going to pop up all of those books and which you could buy for purchase. Now, a lot of those are second printings. I will let you know that. And, there are second printings in there. If you're looking for first printed comics, boy, howdy, good luck. It's going to be hard. Not impossible, but hard if you're looking for a first printing.
Have you ever thought of the trade paperback route on that?
We did. We have 2 trade paperbacks of that. I think there's 2 trade paperbacks of Red Dawn. There's an omnibus of World War III. Now, the last few books from like issue from the 45th, something like that, or 39th forward, those are not in trade paperback. Not yet. We might do it later on, but really, that just really depends on the sales. What I've changed differently in the company is I really don't want to go to trades unless we hit a certain number. Okay, I've sold this amount. Okay, now I'm going to put it in a trade. Especially with this stuff like that, we want to get some kind of return for the investment that we put into them, so that we can fund things like Action Force Redux, which is on a whole different scale than possibly that was back then. So the Millerverse, it's I'm glad to see it in fruition.
Definitely gonna be checking that out because I don't know where I was during this, but I did not know anything about that. I would have been all over that. That's the thing about this community. There's projects being done all over the place, and it's hard to try to support all these things without knowing what's going on. And I'm very, very happy that I'm learning that you've been doing a lot of GI Joe comics for 25 years that I didn't know about. Now that gives me new, original, cool stuff to go back and read and get my imaginations flowing and stuff. Because really, there hasn't been a lot of GI Joe comics this year, and I think this is the perfect opportunity over the next couple of months, 3-4 months, because GI Joe is on hiatus. There's no comics coming out till whoever picks up the license starts putting stuff. So I think fans, if you want to read GI Joe comics, Rising Sun is the place to be. You can get all this cool stuff.
And of course, back that Kickstarter, which will get you even more.
Yeah,
so
the Kickstarter, you can get all your Action Force issues 1 through 4. You can go back and get some of the ancillary books, palatoy books, Action Force history from the beginning. I think you would love it just like I love it.
Absolutely. I think once you see that declassified book, it's going to kind of blow your mind because there was some really cool stuff coming out. Some really, really cool stuff. Some stuff I was like, that is awesome. Why didn't we get that? There was a moon base that was actually going to stick to the wall, I think. out of that. And before there was another one coming later on, done by where Kurt was doing it for the 95 line, but they were going to do it in like 83 or 84.
Oh yeah, I've seen production on that. Yeah, that was gonna be awesome. I love all that space stuff. If you
Yeah.
saw the declassified panel this past couple weeks ago at AR, all that space stuff that was gonna be animated special, and I love all that sci-fi stuff. Please, so yeah,
Well,
I want to read more about that. I do. I don't think
well,
they covered enough Star Brigade in GI Joe itself. So if there's all kinds of sci-fi, fantasy stuff, I'll eat all that up. I want it.
yeah, and I think that Chris and Pat, not Picard, we were discussing it at that time. I've got to go find some information for him, but I think there was actually going to be a comic inside the figure, one of the figure packs,
There was.
if I remember
You
correctly,
mentioned it.
about Steel Brigade, about Star Brigade at that time. But I've got to go find that information for them and check it out. But you know that as far as Action Force goes, there is just a ton of stuff, and I'm thrilled to be able to present this to our community. As you can see, I'm kind of beaming with it because Action Force Redux is this project that we really want to go forward and really want to tell a story that is, knock it out of the park. So hopefully we get some funding behind it. And like I said, Rising Sun has already funded issues 1 through 3. Those were already funded, paid for. We just need a little help getting issue 4 done so that we can fulfill our obligations to everyone and make sure that everything's seen through. Yeah.
So I want to thank you, Hawk, for joining me today. I want to thank you, fans out there. Go support the Kickstarter. Go buy all the cool stuff that's included in the Kickstarter as part of the Kickstarter, because you won't be disappointed. I will talk to Hawk again soon on part 2, and we will have part 3 down the road as well. So Action Force is really cool, and I really enjoy all that stuff. And I thank you for talking about Action Force and enlightening me. And there's so many others out there, I'm sure will be enlightened by this as well. So go check out Rising Sun. There's a lot there. And back this Kickstarter, please. We want this. I need this. We will talk to you again soon.
Thank you, David. Bye, everyone.